Bill and I are still in Chicago, and one of the things that is really special to me, as everyone at Berean knows, how much I and Bill love the gospel of Jesus Christ. But what prepares the heart for the gospel is the law of God. And David said in Psalm 119, verse 97, "Oh, how love I your law, it's my meditation all the day long." And Bill, I know that you have a great love for the gospel, but also the law of God is practical for our everyday life as well. And when we think about our private life as Christians, our public life as Christians, obeying the law is very important. Could you explain a few thoughts on it from your point of view?
Well, that's exactly right. One of the things that's happened in our day is that we have numerous churches that are overrun with the doctrine of antinomianism. And that's the doctrine that we are saved by grace, but do not have to obey the law of God. In other words, that would be optional. And that is an ancient and serious heresy. It's dealt with in the Scriptures. But let me direct our attention to the words of Christ in John 14:21. Christ said, "He that has my commandments and keeps them, he it is that loves me." Christ is not confused, obviously, on the issues of law and grace. Christ said, "If you love me, keep my commandments."
Right.
His great apostle John says in 1 John chapter 2 and verse 3, "Now by this we know that we know him." So in other words, this would be a ground of assurance. It's not the only ground, but it's one ground of assurance, one of the aspects to ground our assurance. "Now by this we know that we know him." So it's about salvation. "Now by this we know that we know him, if we keep his commandments." Now that does not mean that we keep them with an utter perfection. Only Christ kept them with perfection. But the bent of the hearts, because of the new heart we have, and the law being written on our heart, Hebrews 8, Ezekiel 36, we have a desire to obey the law of God, not to be saved, but because we are saved. So if we do not obey the law of God, it's evidence, not that we're backslid, it's an evidence of unconversion. Even though a believer can fall, can slip, but then must be recovered, but it's not persistent. So the one under grace is a law keeper, and that expresses our love to the Lord.
A true Christian is a law keeper.
That's correct.
Make some application here in our public life, whether it's in the church, in our work outside of the church. How does this apply?
Well, one of the great commandments is that we are not to do anything to violate God's law. And that means we don't do anything towards our neighbor, which is not right. And so to fulfill the law and express the love of God, I do those things which are lawful towards my neighbor.
Okay. Now, say if people in our church, we have attorneys, we have business people, how does it relate to their work?
That's a great question. That is, they should be totally biblically honest before God and before men. And we are not to misrepresent. For a businessman, we're not to misrepresent. And we're not to cause loss. We're to be completely out of the light and honest. It doesn't matter what the American business practices might be in those areas. We're to obey the law of God. For example, if I misrepresent and take money from someone, then that's a violation of God's law. You shall not steal. So in other words, I'm not going breaking into their house and stealing, but I'm misrepresenting a product, for example. That's stealing. Also, Pastor, you could go to Leviticus 6 also to get information about being honest and not dealing falsely with our neighbor. So that includes business practices. Luke 19, when Zacchaeus got saved and got right with the Lord, remember he said that I will restore fourfold all that I've taken. And part of God's law is you make double restitution if you've caused loss, And he says, I will restore fourfold. Jesus didn't say, no, you're being legalistic. Jesus said, today salvation has come to your house. So grace operated to lead Zacchaeus to make restitution where he caused loss. So those in business or any other area should not cause loss to our neighbors by misrepresentation.
So if we are truly walking with the Lord, keeping the commandments of Christ and the law of God, then we ought to make sure that everything we do is upright, honest, has integrity, doesn't misrepresent or deceive in any way.
Any of those things you just mentioned, if we do them, we have broken the laws of God, and there will be consequences.
and briefly, the consequences for breaking God's law in a believer's life or in someone's life.
For the believer, it's going to bring certain chastisement. There will be sanctions, and chastisement will come. If it is persistent, though, Pastor, we need to stress this. We have persistent lawbreakers who continually do things that are dishonest. That's a sign of the unregenerate.
A person never know the Lord.
That's right.
Well, I trust this will be a help to our folks at Berean. In all of our lives, we need to be holy and righteous before the Lord and with a pure heart. Anyway, thanks so much, Bill.